and welcome to another edition of Pulp Picks. My name is Patrick.
I'm Fritz.
And we're here to give you this week's comic book reading recommendations on New Comic Book Day. I'll be surprised if anybody's surprised by these picks, let's put it that way. But it's a big week, and there was a whole bunch of good stuff.
Yeah.
After last week, I think we're only, 5 or 6 titles short of what we were at last week, and last week was massive.
Yeah, no, it's like they keep putting out a bunch of stuff, and thankfully it's all really good. So
yeah, I've read so much this week, and there was all good stuff. So, well, let's dive in. And
who could have foreseen Ultimate Spider-Man issue 6? I think this is now like the longest anything is like shown up on here.
It is 6 for 6, and that has got to be a record.
Yeah. So as you can tell from this cover, this is like kind of like the culmination of the first arc of the series. It's Spider-Man and Green Goblin versus the Kingpin. And as has been kind of the case for this story so far, they are not ready for this. Like, without getting too deep into it, I was talking to you yesterday about how like this whole first arc should have just been called "They're Not Ready."
Yeah, that would be the perfect title. I want to see that on the binding of the graphic novel.
Like but that's also been part of the charm of this, is just like getting to see these guys who like we're so used to seeing as like kind of like the pinnacles of like what it means to be like heroes and villains, or in this case for Harry, he's like trying to be a hero here. Like they just don't really know what they're doing yet. Like they go into the situation thinking they've got everything under control, and then Kingpin's just like, no.
Yeah.
You don't at all.
Yeah. There's a panel in which Harry shows surprise. You know, his eyes are just shocked, like, oh God.
Yeah.
What did we do? And it's drawn so perfectly. Like, you can feel the tension in that moment.
Yeah, like there's just like, and it's so visceral, the fight. Like it's just like you feel every blow, because like you find out. So the whole story is basically the aftermath is Peter like having to explain like what happened to someone. Like, hey, why do you look like you got hit by your truck? Like,
because it makes no sense in his life up until this point.
Yeah, like it's just like what's happening here, and like going into it all and just like kind of relating like what happened. And one of the things I love about this Peter is, as much as he's like, yeah, being a superhero sounds cool and fun, and it's like the first time he actually has to like go do like a real superhero or anything, it's just like, that we have to break the law. I don't know how I feel about that. Like, and it's like this kind of like running joke throughout this. Like he's still finding his footing. Like, yeah, he can like ostensibly do a lot. Like he can swing and like he can like kind of be in a fight, but like he's still like just isn't sure like what it really means to be a superhero in this world yet. And no one is part of the problem.
Yeah, and back to the visceral quality of this one. I think that here again, they've gotten kind of the core of another character, and that's Kingpin, right?
Yeah.
He schemes, and he's got plots, and he has people who do his dirty work for him. But back to the beginning of the character, when things get tough, he gets physical.
Yeah.
And he is just a brute, and he is this imposing physical force that is almost unstoppable, and they just got that so well. It just and there's such this like dark humor to him, because like there's a point during the fight where like one was just like, that could have killed him if he was a normal person, and he's just like, yeah, that's the point. And which also lets them know like, hey, this is not some kind of fantasy game. Yeah, this is for real.
There's consequences.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was great. Amazing fight scene. Well told story, and I really like MJ's part in this story.
Yeah, like her everything
like
with her in here. There's a great bit about how like, wait, what do we call you now? Like just like the way we get there, it's so good, because it's like you almost didn't think about it up until now. Just like, oh yeah, like what, like that hasn't really come up yet, and then like how it does like come about is great. Yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
But no, I don't know what more we can say about the series that we haven't said with every other issue. I'm super excited because the next arc, they're bringing in the Sinister Six, which if you are online, you've maybe seen they've released like the covers for that. So it's a very interesting team. Like some people you expect, some others like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. And then like one was just like, why are you here?
Yeah. I'm trying to go through the roster in my head again.
Yeah. But like, so like beyond excited for that, like especially considering like how this goes for them. It's
I'm
just
remembering who you're talking about.
Yeah, considering how this went for them just against Kingpin, it's just like, I don't know how they're supposed to handle this. Like, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I have full faith that it's going to be done exceptionally well, because this is seriously, this first 6 issues is one of the best modern superhero comics I've read.
Easy.
Like, it's just, it's so good.
And the fact that it's done means, hey, there's going to be a collected version coming out soon, so if you missed anything, you can just dive right into that.
Yeah.
And speaking of diving right in.
Yes, so, wow, that's excellent, because here on the cover,
happy I was able to see that.
right here on the cover of Uncle Scrooge and the Infinity Dime #1, Uncle Scrooge is diving into the money bin, which is, you can't, I don't think you could have been, a kid in the 80s or since and not be familiar with Uncle Scrooge diving in the money bin. So this is an interesting culmination of a number of things. One, obviously Disney. Now Marvel is publishing this one. So you do have a little bit of Marvel flair in here as well. And then, the original Carl Barks material that all of DuckTales is based on. And so if you're not familiar with the work of Carl Barks, he's got a really interesting life, and I recommend that you go out. There's some documentaries about him, really well done. But basically, he always wanted to be an illustrator, and he came from a time and a place and a family that just was not interested in supporting that at all. So he constantly going against the grain and not really having any success doing it. But he followed his passion. He kept trying to do it while also kind of trying to appease these other people in his life who were trying to pull him away from it. Long story short, he gets to Disney and tries to become an animator. And it doesn't really go great for him. He kind of gets by, but he realizes, like, the animation stuff I'm not really great at. So he is getting ready to leave, and this comic book project comes up where they're like, hey, we want to do Donald Duck comics. Who would be good at that? Oh, Carl's really good at drawing that kind of stuff. What if we let him do that? And he basically is like isolated from the company and the readers of this book, and he just keeps drawing it, not knowing for years, not knowing whether it's well received or not. And it is still considered one of the all-time great comic book works ever done. He created all the the vast majority of the characters that you're familiar with on DuckTales. The whole dynamic of Donald and Uncle Scrooge and Huey and Dewey and Louie, that they're adventurers and, all of that kind of stuff. So, at the back of this, so the story is inspired by all of that, all of DuckTales. And then at the back of it, we actually get a reprinting of the original Carl Barks setup issue where Donald and Huey, Dewey, and Louie end up creating the bond with Uncle Scrooge that then becomes their adventures and everything. So this is one of those... I dabble in comic book history and comic strip history.
I couldn't have guessed from the whole monologue.
And I'm far from an expert, but I really do enjoy it to the point where there, the likes of Chester Gould and Carl Barks and, those iconic creators who wrote and drew stuff that inspired so many afterwards to take it on. And he's one of those guys who the end of his documentary is a happy ending, which is awesome. But he's one of those people who he did it because he loved it, and he was also extremely talented. And that's just such a cool thing for us to be able to continue to appreciate that stuff, 60, 70 years after the fact. That the story in the back of this reads as smoothly as the story in front of it. It's not as complex, obviously.
Yeah.
And to see the framework of how so many people built so many great stories upon that afterwards, it's awesome. Now, the stuff in the front is really cool. It's definitely, when you read it, you'll get the Marvel flair. They even throw enough set in there, which I was like, okay. But the gist of the story is that there's a multiverse, basically. And what if a Scrooge from the multiverse decided that he wanted all the Lucky Dimes, and if he wanted all of the wealth of the multiverses, how would you go about tackling that? And we get to see the Uncle Scrooge from Duckburg, from DuckTales, the one that we're familiar with, have to try to overcome that. So really good. The art in it is gorgeous. It's a number of different creators working on a large volume. So it is a $10 book. $8. Yeah, it's $8, but it's well worth it. And the Carl Barks story in the back, anybody who has enjoyed DuckTales at any point in time should really read it, because that is the culmination of everything.
And like it's interesting because I remember that was first announced, and it's just like, obviously a lot of people were like, Jason Aaron writing an Uncle Scrooge book is like such like a like out of left field like pitch that like no one like would ever see it coming. And then it turns out, good pick on their part. It's fun. It's just because we were talking before about like how much like stuff like this just makes you want to revisit like the original comic strips, the 80s cartoon, the cartoon from a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Just like it, like there's something about all of this that is just like so intrinsically fun and whimsical, and just like the sense of adventure in it all.
Yeah, and we get a lot of people coming in talking about how, this IP has been overdone, and this IP has been overdone, and there's too many cooks in the kitchen, or shareholders don't really understand it enough. They're just trying to get this minimum return on their investment. And I think that the whole Uncle Scrooge, Donald Duck, Huey, Dewey, Louie wing of Disney is under the radar for them just enough. It's that there's creators who really care about the properties to be able to continue telling stories that feel authentic as opposed to just a money grab.
Yeah, I always love when you've got those things where like the owners like know it's popular enough to make more of it, but never enough that like it saturates and like devalues it. It's great.
Yosagi Yojimbo is a great example. I think that's been a creator-owned property the entire time, and he is continuing to tell the ongoing story. Anyway. Well, speaking of intellectual properties and people who are doing a really good job of caring for it,
we've got Destro issue 1, the latest in the series of Joe miniseries they've been putting out for the new Energon universe.
Yeah, I hope that people who are watching every week aren't like, oh God, all they do is pick Ultimate Spider-Man and something from the Energon, or Ultimate something and something from the Energon universe. But there is a reason.
There's a reason. Like it's like I was saying to you before, like this might be my favorite, because like I've enjoyed everything from the Energon universe, Transformers, Joe's, Void Rivals. Like at least of like the Joe stuff, Destro might be my favorite of those so far. Like there's just something so fascinating about him as a character, because he's a guy who like nominally is always just kind of like Cobra Commander's like second in command, but at the same time, like we were talking, like he's someone that given the right situation, like as compared to like Starscream under Megatron, is just he's always just going to be that lackey. Like he'll try to take command, but he's bad at it. It's not going to work out. Right. Destro, like if Cobra Commander or something were to happen, like he could and would like be able to take over and at least be as competent, if not better. Right. So like seeing like what it means to be this guy being like second in command when he knows he could be first, like how that affects him, like I love it. I love to see these guys like trying to figure out their place in the hierarchy of things.
Yeah, and as a kid, when in the toy line Destro struck out on his own and did the Iron Grenadiers and all of that kind of stuff, I was like, it's about time. He's obviously better at this than Cobra Commander. He runs away at the end of every episode. But the letter at the back of this that Dan Waters wrote, I really enjoyed, and we quoted it as we were talking about what we were going to pick earlier. This is not the story of how a good man turned bad. Yeah. And that's perfect, because I think too many times those stories are attempted. And sometimes people are just bad people at the beginning of their arc, you know?
Yeah.
And Destro's not a good person in this.
And, like, part of what I love is that, like, he, like, understands that contextually, but, like, in the wider world, like, he's not considered, like, a good person, and he's just like, I don't care.
Right.
And it's interesting because, like, he's, like you said, like, he's a bad guy, he knows he's a bad guy, but, like, in the same way, he's, like, a monster that has, like, a sense of, like, I wouldn't say, like, ethics or morals, but, like, he's got, like, almost like a code of conduct of, like, this is how I do things. Like, I'm a businessman. I like, things are transactional.
Yeah, like a sense of duty.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to family and...
Which that whole sequence with like, kind of, like, flashing to the different statues of, like, his ancestors was...
Yeah.
I really dug that.
Yeah, and it has you kind of thinking, like, does he have a screw loose? Is he imagining things here? Is something going on?
Is it just kind of like one of those things where, like, oh, you just go to a place and, like, it allows you to have this, like, clear sense of mind?
Yeah,
and,
like a meditative
yeah,
kind of,
yeah.
Yeah, and I highly recommend that if you pick up this book, which you absolutely should, read the letter from Dan Waters in the back, because it alludes to kind of the direction that this is going to go.
Yeah.
And you can kind of guess on some of that stuff because of where this character has, you know, their story arc has gone in other iterations. I'm really excited for how all these different pieces are going to come together, which it kind of reminds me of the beginning of the Krakoan age of the X-Men, in that you've got all these great creators, but they seem to be working really well together for kind of a common goal. And, like, there's an idea for how these all these stories are going to culminate into one big narrative.
Like, with this, you kind of see, like, how it's building out threads in, like, both Duke and Cobra Commander, but also, like, introducing a bunch of new characters. There's a couple fan favorites that show up in here that, like, they're scary. That like, also, this is definitely, like, and, like, all the books have, like, been comfortable, like, delving into, like, like, obviously, if you're familiar with the cartoons, it might be a little jarring at first, but, like, a world with, like, people like this would be a bit more, like, jarring and violent than you'd expect, because, like, some bad stuff happens to people in this book. Like, a lot of people die.
Yeah.
And a lot of them probably didn't deserve it, at least the way it happens.
Yeah, and we do get to see kind of that friction between Destro and Cobra Commander. I am super excited for when Destro and Baroness show up on panel together for the first time, because I'm so curious about how that's going to go, because of where their starting points for those characters in this Energon universe is so interesting.
On a related note, and speaking of, like, Destro having a female companion, there's one in here that's, like, one, an interesting deep cut for Transformers fans, and two, just, like, the way that their relationship already is, especially, like, in the context of, like, the last couple pages, is that smile he has at the end is, like, terrifying.
Yeah. Excellent. And the art was fantastic too. All good stuff. Well, we've been asked to kind of give kind of our backup picks. You know, was there anything else that was on your radar that almost made the list?
Let me think here. What else was there? Because, man, there was so much to pick from. World's Finest. This current arc for World's Finest, where it's, like, them versus, like, fifth dimensional imps and everything, has been super fun. Just kind of see, like, how those power sets get used sometimes is super interesting, like, having to hop between dimensions. Technically not a new thing, but if I had to recommend anything, they got the new printing of the Knights of the Old Republic comic back when Dark Horse had it. This is one of my favorite, like, Star Wars anythings, canon or not canon, following Jedi Padawan who gets framed for a horrific crime and is trying to, like, figure out, like, okay, like, why is this happening to me? And, like, stumbles onto all this other stuff going on. Real, like, eclectic, funny cast of characters who, like, are all just, like, stuck in the situation together, and they kind of just have to learn to, like, get along and become, like, a team. It's fantastic.
The Dark Horse stuff is still beloved. We always have people looking for individual issues of that stuff.
Yeah, no. And, like, if you couldn't tell from the title, yes, it does have connections to the original Knights of the Old Republic video game. A certain someone shows up in here. They've got a different name, but you'll definitely know them when you get to them.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I really enjoyed Wonder Woman again. It's it was the setup to, I think, the big final conflict. So again, it was just really well done. It's such a great creative team on it. And Doctor Strange, the continuation of the Blood Hunt story arc that's happening in Doctor Strange with his creepy vampire ghost brother and that plot coming to fruition, and then we see that was kind of set into motion by whoever it is that's behind Blood Hunt. It appears to be Blade.
Yeah, like I'm very curious what the revelation on that front's going to be, because like there's definitely something else going on.
Yeah, we keep getting lots of references to ancient Atlantis, so I'm sure that it has something to do with that, but how specifically we'll see. And then we had one more question. It was, what are you reading right now, or what are you buying right now that you're not really enjoying reading, I guess is kind of how it was phrased, that you drop if it weren't, if you didn't feel like you had to keep going.
Oh, okay, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's tough because we want to sell books, so I don't really want to push anybody away from anything, but
I don't know, I guess I could view as like pointing out a book that like I enjoy, but like I've got like, I don't know, maybe like constructive criticism for.
Sure.
Like now that I say it, I've got to think of like what one would be.
Yeah, well, while you're thinking of it, I'm going to throw out Amazing Spider-Man. And, I know that I had an issue a few weeks ago on the picks, but it was kind of, the bright spot in what's been a really mediocre run. And I feel, we talk about it quite a bit here, it feels like, we were talking earlier about how, these large companies kind of over-manage some of these intellectual properties to kind of keep it, cranking out a profit as opposed to being daring with it or being true to kind of the roots of the character or the origins of the character. And I just feel like Amazing Spider-Man's one of those with it. I think hopefully the sales numbers of Ultimate Spider-Man will show Marvel Disney that people really want a more, I don't know, authentic Peter Parker, like a Peter Parker who grew a little bit, because we were talking about him yesterday, and it's like, he was, this seems too goofy, too childish.
Yeah.
And even though he was a child when he started, he was always kind of more like cranky.
Yeah.
He was never really just kind of a goof.
Yeah.
Like he failed at things not because he was, a numbskull or whatever. It was because he had so much on his plate, and that's why he also snapped at people and constantly was arguing and then having to apologize with his friends and whatever. And now it seems like he's just kind of bloop, 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 through life, and stuff just keeps happening to him, and he's just unprepared for all of it, as opposed to just overwhelmed by the amount of it. So it's fine, but I have to pick up every issue because I've got so many issues of Amazing Spider-Man. I don't want to have to go back and find them later just to complete the collection.
Yeah, I think if I had to think about the one I might pick is, so despite the fact that it's been up here and I really enjoy it, I would say maybe Ultimate Black Panther. Not because I think it's like bad by any means, but I'd say part of what's been super appealing about all the Ultimate books so far is that they're like really taking swings and like trying something different.
Sure.
Like you've got here with Peter trying to like actually learn to be a superhero and like diving headfirst into this world that he really doesn't understand.
Yeah.
The Ultimates, instead of being like a traditional superhero team, as far as the world's concerned, they're basically terrorists, even though they're not.
Right. Yeah.
The X-Men are almost more of like a like Sailor Moon group at this point, which I find super interesting.
Yeah.
Black Panther, for the most part, really just reads like a very traditional Black Panther book, and I mean that on the one hand in the best way possible because it does it really well. But on the other hand,
and it is kind of refreshing because Black Panther hasn't been there in 616 for a while.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's just like there's elements of it there, and some of the recent solicits coming up look like it might be getting more there. But like I wanted to just like try and be something more than what it already is. Yeah. Like just trying to really like shake it up more. Like, and like I said, there's elements there. You've got like the different like factions within Wakanda that are kind of like vying against each other. Like Khonshu and Ra are very different characters than their 616 versions and like what they've got going on. There's the mystery of whatever they found underground. Like,
yes,
there's definitely stuff there, but like I just it just needs to go that a little bit further to really get
let's
there.
See him. Let's hope that this is all set up for a big swing.
Yeah,
I hear you. One last thought on that. I am really nervous about all the jackets that are showing up on the Avengers team.
You say nervous? I like all the jackets.
We had to do a Google search to look for the jackets team. Like Circe and Crystal and Black Knight.
I say these jackets are much better than the jackets they had in the 90s.
Well, they are, but that's a low bar. So there's a lot of jackets showing up. I'm nervous. So, all right. Well, thank you for joining us this week. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, leave comments about any of the stuff that we said or the comics that you've been enjoying reading. And we love to see those. Be sure to stop into the store because we've got all these books up here for you to be able to pick up. And then we'll be back next week. So join us next week for more picks. Thanks and enjoy the reading.
We should get team jackets now.
Should we get pulp jackets?
Yeah.
They got to be like leather jackets, but everybody's got to like pull up the sleeves and they've got to be just a little bit too short.
Yeah.
That would be great. I wonder what that would cost. I looked into
hockey
sweaters at one point.
Probably more than is worth it for the bit. Like that's the thing. Like there's so much stuff where it's like, this would be fun. Is it worth spending the money? Not really, no.
Yeah, if we weren't poor comic hawkers, then maybe.